The subject of meditation is the central theme to ancient wisdom. The whole purpose of ancient wisdom, which after all is but the expression of the memory of mankind, the whole purpose of ancient wisdom is to supply, to give, to enrich a system, a method for contacting the gods. And by that we mean meditation. Meditation is the language of communication between kingdoms. Not necessarily the language between the communications of man with his gods, but perhaps with man and those who live within him, below him, beneath him, or in microcosm. Those to whom man is a god. My little white cat thinks I'm a god. When we have bad weather in England, which is most frequently, and I go to the front door to let her out, she takes one look at the snow on the ground, and she looks up at me as if to say, "Is that the best you can do?" And of course, to her, I am God. And to many of the kingdoms below us, we should act like gods. Man stands as a balance between the kingdoms of nature. He stands as a balance between, for instance, the vegetable kingdom, the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom. And he, in turn, is but the microcosm to great entities like a planetary logos, a solar logos, and that which lies in the infinite. Man stands as a balance. Indeed, he is more than this. He is a balance between spirit and matter, spirit and matter. He incorporates within him all aspects of matter. We're inclined to forget sometimes that we contain within us metals like calcium, calcium of the bones, phosphorus of the bones, iron of the blood, and yet we are able to take this material, solid as it is, compact, and we can infuse it with spirit. We have this capacity to take the grossest material and infuse it with spirit. In fact, man stands as a sort of halfway house between the two, spirit and matter. We incorporate both of these within us. We should always remember that no being in the universe has so much gross matter within him, as well as so much spirit. They are grosser beings than us, but they have less spirit. No being in the universe incorporates so much spirit with so much grossness, so much gross matter. There are beings higher in spirit than we, but they have less denseness of form. And so man stands, as it were, as a halfway house between many kingdoms. And it will be learnt in the next 500 years that we have a tremendous duty to the kingdoms beneath us. We have to remember that it is into our care that these kingdoms have been thrust. And the work of Cleve Baxter and Marcel Vogel and others in the field, in the kingdom of the vegetable, the plant, are terribly important. Plants have something to tell us. Plants have something to give us. I can't believe that an apple tree merely gives up its fruit for us to eat. I believe that it communicates something more. We too can communicate with animals. We can communicate with the lower kingdoms equally as well as we can with the high. Not through word of mouth, not through our eyes and our sensory organs, but by direct contact. And direct contact is obtained in meditation. Direct, by that I mean not using mind and its sensory equipment, but using higher mechanisms of consciousness. We are all of us Promethean-like. Like Prometheus, we must take the stiff, harsh path up the mountain face. Like Prometheus, we steal fire from the gods. Some of us who know what our duty is, our task is, and who equip ourselves and make ourselves sensitive, climb the mountain face. Like Prometheus, we steal the fire of the gods, spiritual fire. We bring it down to mankind and we learn to heal mankind. We learn to teach mankind. We are vehicles for this fire that we take from a higher kingdom. We should always remember what our task is, our purpose is as spiritual individuals. We have to remember this because meditation becomes completely purposeless unless we know what we're trying to do. This is the pity. This is the pity of man in the West. He wants to meditate. He struggles hard to obtain a precious half hour each morning, and luckily, if possible, one in the evening, another half hour in the evening to meditate. Obtains this time from the very harsh duties and endless duties of his day. And then not to know what to do with that half hour. It's heartbreaking. We must know what we're trying to do. And that is why I have put together 2 or 3 lectures on the subject of meditation for this festival. We need to remember that there are beings on this planet relatively near to perfection. And we are struggling towards perfection. And if we could observe intelligently, spiritually, the progress of such organisms as they near perfection, we could copy them. We could emulate them. Perhaps the most obvious example is the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom is nearing perfection. It is a kingdom which is constantly blooming into perfection. We ourselves, the human kingdom, possess but a few masters of the wisdom, a few precious flowers of humanity. 62 masters on the planet at this time, the flower of humanity. And they have reached the end of the long road for humanity. They have reached perfection. For the rest of us, we still struggle forward, always searching for what Plato called truth, beauty, and goodness, the ultimate in spiritual quality. And some of us are a little ahead of our younger brothers. And if we could, those of us who tread the path a little ahead, study what goes on in the plant kingdom as the masses of plants reach perfection, we would see what we have to do. We could in fact compare ourselves on the path of discipleship to one of these flowering plants. If we had walked the planet 90 million years ago, we would have seen nothing but green plants everywhere. And then an incredible initiation of the plant kingdom occurred, and masses and masses of angiosperms began to, through a spurt of evolution conveyed by Venus, began to blossom into perfection and flower. We are like such an individual, we who tread the path. Let us compare man with his various equipment to that of a flower. We know what man is made of. We learned from our previous talks that we possess a personality which is symbolized by an inverted triangle. This personality is made up of a physical body, it is made up of a mental body and an astral body, which we symbolize in a 3-sided triangle. But man possesses a higher nature, a soul that overshadows him. And he has to construct, as it were, an Antakarana, a bridgehead to his soul. Let us compare man on the path to a flowering plant. Let us compare the seed of the monad, which is man, to the seed of a plant. The seed of the monad, thrust down by various mechanisms through 7 planes that I described the other night. And this seed of man, the seed of the monad, begins to put out part of himself into the material world, just as the seed of a plant, given water, warmth, and oxygen, puts part of itself out, sends down radicals, roots, as it were, into the harsh soil of the garden. Man is like this, primitive man, savage man. He puts his roots down into the material world. He garners from that world all that there is to give him. But after a while, the plant learns, as it were, to send up part of itself, a cumule, if you wish, into the upper world. There it begins to unfold part of its higher nature. Man does exactly the same. He integrates a personality of 3 vehicles. And only when that personality is integrated is he able to begin to put up, as it were, an Antakarana, searching for his higher nature. And he searches into a higher world, as it were, just like the plant. The plant now no longer needs so much the nutrition of the soil. The plant is now able to draw, as it were, the energies of light into its leaves. And by a process of photosynthesis, it is able to store the energy of light in its leaves. And in a particular part of the plant, the growing point, a region of stress occurs, where cells are bent and broken, and a growing point emerges into a bulb-like structure. Similarly, man must do the same. Man must open his inner vehicles, the vehicles of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. And man struggles hard to do just this. There is no growth without stress. And if you could have walked the planet those 80 or 90 million years ago, you may have seen just one plant, one flower suddenly blossom into perfection. Blossom into perfection. It has become a master. Now its aura is not confined to a few green cells. Now the fragrance of that perfected flower may reach many miles away. Now its nectar is the attractive point for higher beings like insects. Similar with man. Man himself unfolds and eventually flowers into perfection. And we need to do justice. We need to know what lies ahead of us. Socrates called the path that we take to the higher world, he called it the jeweled way, the jeweled way. And still to this day, if you look at stained glass windows with any sort of imagination, you may see what Socrates and the saints have tried to tell us since then, that when you enter the higher kingdom, when you begin to cross the frontiers of man's mind beyond where mind can exist, you become aware of the jeweled way, the sparkling, glorious symbols, the symbols of rich qualities of the spirit that encrust the walls of that jeweled way. Others from the east might call it a path strewn with lotuses, a path strewn with lotuses that begins at the base of the human spine and radiates upwards in ever-increasing glory, a path strewn with lotuses. And we all take this path to spiritual unfoldment. And we meet these glorious flowers of perfection on that jeweled path to the higher worlds. It has been described in many, many ways. Somebody once said, God gave us roses that we might have memories in December. God gave us roses that we might have memories in December. We're just in that sort of category. We learn to create, as it were, to absorb, to understand the structure of our chakras. The four-petaled lotus at the base of the spine, the greenish-hued chakra that lies in the sacral region, the vermilion structure which lies 2 inches above the umbilicus, a 10-petaled lotus, and then the glorious lotus of the heart in rich chrome Buddhic yellow, and then the glorious colors of purple and green which represent the throat chakra, the 16-petaled lotus. And all the time as we unfold, we learn to see these lotuses, first as symbols in our inner worlds, and then by direct realization of them as they open. The jeweled way of Socrates, a path strewn with lotuses. And later, of course, these actual studies that we make of the lotuses in the classical works of Leadbeater and elsewhere, these studies are no longer necessary. They are converted to memories. And so I say again, God gave us roses that we might have memories in December. In the latter part of our life, in our maturity, when we reach the same period in our life as Jesus reached, for he was born in December, in late December. We learn on the path of unfoldment in our communication with the gods. We learn to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. We learn to lay up ourselves treasures which, as the Bible say, are in such a place where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt them, and where thieves do not break through. What a wonderful thing it is to know that we have a cosmic bank into which we can deposit our spiritual qualities endlessly. And ladies and gentlemen, there is such a cosmic bank. What have we to worry about recessions that affect our personality lives when every one of us can deposit spiritual energies of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas into such a bank? Some of you are beginning to have visions and experiences of jewels, sparkling jewels, and the jewel and the stained glass window are symbols of this world that we must penetrate. I know of at least two of you in the audience who have had very, very fine, wonderful visions, experiences after studying the work like the jewel and the lotus. Lay up treasures in heaven. What does one experience in such a place? The saints used to try and depict heaven in terms of stained glass windows in the quiet sanctuaries around the altar of the great cathedrals in France and Italy. What a beautiful place it is to stand in, to see heaven, as it were, all around you, and to be able to take it away and visualize it so clearly that this actually becomes heaven itself in your meditation. Three great characteristics may be experienced as one progressively meditates with increasing quality and efficiency. Three great characteristics. What are they? In superconscious experience. The experience of light. Light, ladies and gentlemen, that blazes within you like 10,000 suns. And you have to experience that light. And then after, you will know that you have glimpsed but one glance into the kingdom of heaven. Light, eternal. Light which is effulgent. I cannot describe it to you. One glimpse of it, however, is enough. The old world is no longer for you. You will be changed forever. Light. It is an experience which is accompanied by a sense of omniscience, of all-knowing. This is the first characteristic of superconscious experience that emerges. You may not have it in one deluging inflow of light. You may have it spread over many, many years, but there have been those who have experienced cosmic consciousness in this way. And then there is a second characteristic, and that characteristic is ecstasy, tremendous ecstasy, ecstasis out of the body, out of the static, a release, a feeling of such liberation that makes orgasm as nothing compared to it. This glorious experience, which is, of course, accompanied by out-of-body experience, ecstasis, ecstasy. And then there is the third characteristic in which we become aware that we can achieve the final victory in all life. And do you know what that victory is? The ability to control time. The ability to control time. The ability to elongate time and the ability to shorten it. And those are the three characteristics of superconscious experience. I'll say them again. Omniscience with a subjective experience of light, omnipotence with a subjective experience of ecstasy, and thirdly, the ability to control that power which we know as time, that dimension which we know as time. There is an analogy which some of you who have heard me give before must forgive. There is an analogy between our climb into a higher kingdom and that which might be experienced by the little cells of our body in you, remembering that you represent God to them. I wonder whether I might for a moment diverge to give you this analogy which is really very similar to the one that Plato gave in his analogy of the cave. You know what the human eye is? The human eye is an organ which allows light to enter it, and the light strikes the back of the eye in the sensitive part of the retina. And there we are able to pick up a visual image which is conveyed by means of electrical currents to the back of the brain. But ladies and gentlemen, we contain within us tiny little red cells, each one of which may be compared, as it were, to a minor life within us. We ourselves are minor cells, minor lives within the body of a greater being which we call the solar logos. How can I give you, by analogy, an experience of what might occur in superconsciousness? Let us take the life of one of these little red cells in our blood and the way in which it is passed round the body continuous each day in what we call the circulation. The blood, as you know, is pumped from the heart. It is pumped from the heart all round the body. And then it returns to the heart. and passes to the lungs for oxygenation, then back to the heart and round the body again. We call it the circulation of the blood. And the tiny little red cells move with the blood, doing their work within the body of that greater being. Let us suppose that you and I might be one of these little red cells, passing around the body continuously, performing our task, our work, our daily work each day. Let's visualize one of these cells. He leaves the heart and passes into the arm, through the arteries in the arm, experiencing in his task, his daily work, a certain amount of light. I can see light through the fingers of my hand. And in the arteries, these little cells experience daily light in their task. And they do this constantly, giving out oxygen to all the tissues en route. They return that night, as it were, to the heart and pass into the lungs, and are there regenerated with more oxygen. They emerge from the heart in the morning of their day and do their work again, again, and again, and again, like mankind does his work each day, regenerated at night, emerging again in the morning. But one cell, perhaps, stands out, and by virtue of his ability to discipline himself, his ability to make himself plastic and malleable, malleable being one of the most important words in the vocabulary of any disciple, making himself more malleable, one day he forces himself upwards through arteries in the neck into the head region, into the skull, and there passes down tiny capillaries to the back of the human eye. And here he reaches a place where only he can squeeze through a blood capillary, and for a moment he stands at the back of the human eye. What an experience this is! He is no longer experiencing the ordinary light that filters through to average man or other cells. Momentarily he is poised in a place of initiation where he is deluged with light, a blinding light that comes to him, as it were, unshielded, straight from the cosmos. Blinding light bathes him. He is saturated with it. And in that place of power, which we call in the esoteric language the burning ground of initiation, he stands, as it were, spread-eagled, like Prometheus, but now he is deluged with the light of the cosmos, not ordinary planetary light, but the light of the cosmos coming directly into him, saturating him. And in that position, that vantage point of initiation, he is able to see with this brilliant light. He is able to see out into the cosmos. He can see what the whole purpose of this individual in whom he lives and moves and has his being is. He begins to sense something of the direction in which that great being of whom he is a part is moving. He senses the plan. He experiences omniscience, and with it there is the accompanying effulgent light of the Spirit. He might also at that same time sense the power which he has, the omnipotence, and exults in his freedom away from all the rat race of what he has been used to. He is ecstatic. He is in fact supplying oxygen to a part of the eye which enables that eye to see the direction for the planet, for the great one in whom he exists. And for him, time stands still. He is able to see such immense movements in a fraction of a second that for him time has been altered. And then it's all over. He's back again into the eternal round of the blood system, fearful that this experience might never happen to him again. What an experience of superconsciousness it has been. And when he tries to tell the other cells, last night I had an experience. My God, this sunlight that we see here is as nothing compared to the experience that I had. They would laugh at him. They wouldn't believe it. And then he would say to them, come, I will take you there. And they'd say, get away, you're crazy. I don't have that sort of experience. They might even, if he was persistent, they might even injure him. Well, ladies and gentlemen, many of us are like that. We have tasted the higher worlds. And for us, the world of the material no longer means an attraction, an attractive power. as Robert Browning, the English master, once said, "For men begin to pass their nature's bound, and find new hopes and cares which fast supplant their proper joys and griefs. They grow too great for narrow creeds of right and wrong, which fade before the unmeasured thirst for good. While peace rises within them ever more and more, such men are even now upon the earth, serene amid the half-formed creatures round." This is what lies before every one of us. And it approaches us more and more as we undertake the path of initiation. The path of initiation which is made sure for us by meditation. Man is like a flash of form. At one end there is the great electrode of matter. At the other end there is that of spirit, positive and negative. And man is a flash of form. Towards the negative end there is the physical body of man, that body that we know so well, and love so well, and spend so much money upon. And there is the etheric body, which is becoming the province of scientific investigation, intermingling it, interpenetrating it, vitalizing it, capable of being photographed by Turlian photography. And then there is another body, subtler than any of these. We call it the body of feeling, the astral body. We can detach the astral body and move into the higher worlds towards spirit. We are in fact capable of extrasensory perception when we move our consciousness into the astral and the mental and free it from the physical body in what we call sleep or meditation. And there are other vehicles that we know so well. There is the mental body in which we mentate, in which we think. And then the physical part, rather the form part of man, begins to break up. This is his personality. This is that part of man oriented towards material things and expression. But there is another part to man. There is the higher triad of man. And this higher triad of man exists polarized towards the spiritual realms. It has no form. We cannot draw a body here. We cannot even draw a Moses. This is a part of man that is formless. We only know something of its qualities, of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, abstract thought. And this is the realm of man's soul. Here is the monad embedded as the one electrode, the spiritual electrode. This is the flash of form that occurs when a man incarnates. And you and I spend our time in spiritual exercises trying to bridge the gap that exists between man's soul and his personality. This is only a sutratma to begin with, a tiny thread that passes the energy of the soul into the human aura. But in meditation, we have to learn to construct an Antakarana. We have to learn to construct what the Red Indians called the rainbow bridgehead. The rainbow bridgehead. Rainbow because it contains many qualities. It contains the qualities of truth, beauty, and goodness as these stream from the higher nature of man increasingly into the aura. The province of meditation is here. The province of meditation is there. Here ends the frontier of man's mind. Here ends the frontier of man's mind. Here lie the cliffs of fall. O mind, mind has mountains, cliffs of fall, sheer, no man fathomed. And it is only when the mind can be transcended that we enter a no man's land which is called the fifth plane. And it is the plane, the frontier of the fifth kingdom. And we have to construct, first of all, in etheric substance, and then in astral, and then in mental, and then in spiritual essence, this bridgehead to the higher nature of man. Now, I plead with you to furnish your mind, to furnish the concrete mind with such symbols and understandings of what lies ahead. because you can only bring through into waking consciousness what symbols exist in your brain. If you hand a message to a typist and say to the typist, type what I have to say, or type what I have put here, she can only put it down in terms of the symbols on the typewriter. If there are not adequate symbols, the message is incomplete. Your brain is just like that. Furnish it with symbols, symbols of spiritual meaning, and then you can bring through divine wisdom and knowledge and understanding into the waking world. You must put the symbols into the brain. And that is why I have spent nearly a year producing 4 immense textbooks, filled, crowded with symbols, so that you can, through the study of them, furnish the mind, the brain if you wish, with adequate symbols to convey to you in waking consciousness what the gods are trying to tell you. And one of the gods is your own higher self. One of the gods is your own higher self. You should all learn the 4 Ds, which lead to freedom. Freedom from enmeshment in this material world. The first one is detachment. Detachment. No disciple can enter the kingdom without detachment. What are we attached to? The Bible describes it as the rich man. The man who is rich in prejudice. The man who is rich in many, many things. In desire. In worldly goods. Such a man cannot enter the kingdom. He must be poor. A man poor in prejudice. A man poor in preconceived ideas. There can be no psychosynthesis whilst there is attachment to old ideas, old codes of contact, creeds, and ethics. You must be poor in these, and we learn detachment on the way. These are preliminaries to meditation. These are the attachments that hold you back and make your meditation inefficient, unproductive. Attachments. The second D is dispassion. Dispassion, not to become involved, not to become emotionally involved in everything you do. Dispassion. And this helps to sever the links, the hold which the solar plexus has, the solar plexus chakra has on your energy. If you want to read the poem that describes so easily, so well, the dispassion of a master, study Shakespeare's sonnet number 94. Those that have power to do ill but will do none, read it. A beautiful poem, a sonnet, written by a man who was in contact with the masters. And the third D of the 4 is discrimination. Discrimination. Learning to discriminate the real from the unreal. From the unreal, lead me to the real. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. Every part of the human entity contains mechanisms for discriminating the real from the unreal. Even the body will throw itself into an inflammation, an inflammatory reaction, if there is something unreal within it. Perhaps it is staphylococcal germs. Perhaps it is foreign proteins. Perhaps it is a transplanted organ, but the body will fight it off because it is unreal, not self. And this must go on at all levels. Learn to distinguish that which is self and not self at all levels. And the fourth of the D's comes from Ouspensky and from Gurdjieff, the great fifth-ray ashrams, who taught more than anything else that discipleship depends on hard work. I know of no initiate who has not been deluged with hard work, and usually at all levels, challenging every one of his chakras, putting them on their mettle. Hard work. If you are not involved in endless hard work, at all levels, spiritual hard work as well, there is something wrong. You are not on the path of initiation. You are not taking the path up the cliff face, the 4 Ds. The 4 Ds. But perhaps the most difficult step of all for man in the West is to understand that the mind is the slayer of the real. That the mind is the slayer of the real. We are so attached to our minds. We love them. We have created our minds for 30 years, 40 years maybe, and we wonder that we cannot control them when they have been used to bad habits for 30 and 40 years. We need to understand that the mind is an entity. The mind is an entity. It is derived from the substance of the plane of mind. It is made up of mental essence and elementals. It is an entity on its own. The mind of Douglas Baker and the mind of you. And it is responsive to control and to lack of control. Another important point to remember. The mind is an entity. We have attachments to this world, and the mind usually determines what they are. This great body of attachments was described by Carl Jung, Professor Carl Jung, the great psychologist, as the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious. There are patterns of behavior, which after all are only aspects of the mind. There are patterns of behavior which are entrenched in man's nature as the body of humanity. We all have similar brains, 2 eyes, a nose, and so on. We all tend to react to certain situations in given ways. We're plunged into darkness and we fear the dark. Today we have elaborations of this. If you feel lonely, turn on the television. If you feel tired, then take something that will give you a pep. If you feel, as it were, lacking in sexual energy, take an aphrodisiac. We have certain patterns of reaction to our everyday ways. And these represent, in terms of the esoteric, bondage. They're comforting, they keep us sane. They keep us sane. If your nerves are on edge, take a cigarette out. That's the reaction. And it becomes established. And it even has physical expression as well. Take cigarettes away from a man who smoked 100 a day, and he will go into a sickness in which the body craves for the cigarette and will be ill. This is the sort of bondage that every one of us possesses. Links with the collective unconscious. And whilst we have these links and haven't got to stretch the mind beyond its reaches, we are quite happy and we remain sane. But occasionally an individual dares to practice psychosynthesis, dares to try and establish his consciousness about a higher point than it is, in the realms of spirituality, and he learns that he is not prepared any longer to accept the codes of conduct and the ethics of average man. He learns to break these links with the collective unconscious, and then he is freed. He is freed, and if he practices the disciplines of ancient wisdom, then he can be assured that he will soon begin to sense that there are other strands onto which he can link himself. He can link himself to a sutratma which becomes an Antakarana, and he finds that he is linked to a higher world rather than the fourth kingdom. He learns to establish stronger and stronger links. He begins to identify himself with that world, creating symbols all the time in his meditation. And eventually he learns to climb up that Jacob's ladder, if you were, to the higher kingdoms. And there he learns to seat himself with his higher self above the lotus, which is the human soul. This is the path of meditation, and meditation takes us to that place. How do we do it? We have to slay the slayer of the real. And that is the brain, the mind, as it acts through the brain and sense organs. The mind. that which we have cultivated so dearly and have had cultivated for us by our educationists and our religionists, that is all being created and entrenched, and now we have to sweep it aside. Otherwise we are slaves to whatever the mind dictates to us. Try it out if you don't believe me. Lie down flat, compose yourself, and watch what things will come into your mind when you try and clear it. Endlessly things will come in. Those things which demand that you take up again your attachments. The mind cannot bear to be detached. It must have activity. It's got to express itself. Or that mind will become, as it were, receptive to something else. And it doesn't like that. New learning. The mind is an entity, and we are slaves to it. Ezra Pound once said, a slave is someone who waits for someone to set him free. A slave is someone who waits for someone to set him free. Mankind is in slavery, waiting for freedom, waiting to free itself from the mind. And so, we have many propositions which don't appeal to us when we begin to take the path of meditation. And we learn from great beings like Swami Rama and others who have been tried and tested, who have practiced meditation for many years, that meditation begins in the space between thoughts. The space between thoughts. Constantly we are thinking. One thought follows another, one thought after another, a constant stream of them. What we have to do is to be able to take a grasp of the mind so that these thoughts become spaced out. And when they are spaced out, we can grasp the mind and space them further and further until there is, as it were, a space between thoughts. A space between thoughts. And then, and in that place, meditation begins. Meditation begins in the space between thoughts. How can we slow the mind down? There are many ways taught. Let me give you 3 ways. 3 ways in which you can take a grasp of the mind and slow it down. Some of these, or one of these, may appeal to you more than others. You have to find what it is. To those of you who have meditated much, who have led a meditative way of life, one will appeal, again, more than others. Select for yourselves. There is a group of people always in the esoteric world. Some of them have third-rate minds or personalities which must keep busy all the time in outer things. They join an esoteric group, but they make poor meditators. They join a study group, but they study little and are there only to be part of it, as it were. What they prefer to do is to do the organizing and do the activity in the group, which is very, very useful, as I always say. They also serve who merely pay their fees. And there are people who are constantly concerned with making the tea, with addressing the envelopes, with doing the filing, and they get a kick out of it. They're always typing labels and so on, anything which will save them from having to sit alone and control the mind. Learn to meditate. And these are the individuals that need the satipatthana method. It's also a method which can be adapted for use in psychotherapy of schizophrenia. I shan't go into that tonight. The satipatthana method. It requires that you learn to control the mind, but as you know, when you try and grasp the mind, it slips from your fingers, figuratively speaking. What then do we do? What we do is to give the mind some of its own medicine. You want activity? I'll give you activity until you are sick of it. And then perhaps you will obey me. That's the key to it. The mind is an entity. You damn well will. You be sure that you use the will. The satipatthana method. Anchor the mind to a series of activities. You can start in the morning when you awaken, if you wish. From the moment that you awaken in bed, then start to take control of the mind. You take control of it. I am lying here in bed. I am aware that there is light coming in through the windows. I draw the bedclothes aside and feel the movement of the quilts as it glides over the sheets. I'm going to stretch my back. I do stretch my back. I sit up in bed. I swing my legs over the edge of the bed and put them onto the carpet and note the gentle fluffiness of the carpet. I stand up and scratch myself and I move across the floor step by step to the window. I take the curtains and draw them aside with my forefinger and thumb and look out into the garden. I perceive this and so. I turn and I move towards the bathroom and I take down my toothbrush. I watch you know what I mean. Anchor the mind progressively until you can get it under your control to such persistent acts, eternal acts falling one after the other for an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time. Eventually the mind says, to hell with this. I want some freedom. I want some freedom. And you will find that mind, the next time you come to try and control it, when you are seating yourself in your meditation, and you are saying to the mind, I want you to be quiet, you will find that he begins to obey anything except the other routine. Of course, you can learn to do this progressively. You can test yourselves out from time to time. It's an excellent method. It is a wearying method. It's better that you get some degree of isolation in which to do it. Very important. But it works, ladies and gentlemen. That is one of 3 ways, and it's known as the outer way, and it's described in its entirety in my book, Meditation. Then there is the middle way, and this appeals to those who do not see the sense of such anchoring of the mind to outer activities, those who are aware and have had perhaps some experience of meditation, and this is to use the middle way, to anchor the mind into something not quite so concrete as outer activity, to anchor the mind, in fact, to what we might call the rhythm of breathing, Now there is an observation in your quiet period of the way in which the nostrils take in the air. If you have studied the biology of the respiratory tract, and every esotericist should know it backwards, there's nothing difficult about it. If you have studied the biology of the respiratory tract, you will know that as the air is drawn into the nostrils, it comes in through a narrow aperture which increases its speed and its force. It becomes electrical, and in the turbinates of the nose it is spiraled in a shape which most people, like Flanagan and others, would agree is the most important conservatory of energy, and that is a spiraling cone. The turbinates on the surface of the inner nose spiral the air as it's brought in, and they direct it in such a way that it becomes highly electrified and strikes the back of the pharynx, where lies the all-important roots in the medulla of the vagus nerve. You don't have to know all that to begin with. What you need to know is that the air is being drawn in through the nostrils. It passes down through the pharynx, through the opening of the epiglottis into the trachea, windpipes, and the lungs fill up. In, out, in, out. And then you can add your timing to it, to the beat of 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold it, 1, 2, 3, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And variations of this theme, anchoring the mind to a middle way, as it were. The middle way. A very good book on this is Paul Brunton's books. The Secret Path is one of them, and perhaps the most classical of all his works. Then there is the third way, and the third way is to clear the mind, to stop its activities by what might be regarded as the process of energy follows thought. Energy follows thought. Let me give you an example of it. Energy follows thought. At the base of the spine lies the all-important four-petaled lotus, the all-important Muladhara chakra, at the base of the spine. You're sitting in meditation or lying in meditation. The eyes are closed. And what you need to do, of course, is to bring the attention of the mind, which is scattered and diverted all over the place, into the body, within you, and to control it and stop its activities. And the method is to, whilst you are lying there or seated there, to focus your attention to the region of the buttocks, the region of the buttocks. And in this region there lies, as you well know, the perineum. And there we have a ring of muscle, which is known as the anus, the anus. And by contraction of the anus, the attention is brought to this region. Everybody knows how to contract that muscle. Sustained contraction of the anus brings the attention to that area, brings the mind to bear in that region. You no longer will find that you are listening to things outside. Your attention is drawn to one specific function in your body. It would help to know that at that very same place in etheric matter lies the Muladhara chakra. And energy follows thought. Energy follows thought. And by thus seating yourself and directing your energies towards contracting the anus, you are bringing higher energies to stimulate the region of the Muladhara chakra. And this in itself is something highly useful in the process of preparing yourself for meditation. Don't sit there for half an hour contracting the anus. Practice it and then go on to the next stage. The next stage, after perhaps 3 or 4 minutes, is to take your attention, which has been diverted to that region, into the brow region, where you have no sphincter muscles to contract, granted, but where the Hindu initiate places a spot in the middle of the brow, between the eyes, between the eyebrows. This is where you should now be bringing the mind, which is being controlled, taken inwards, down towards the region of the Muladhara. Now, as it is becoming controlled, lifted up to this region. Your mind is here, focused in the brow. What next to do? The next thing to do is to learn to visualize. Learn to visualize certain patterns onto which your mind may now be concentrated. And so we would find that it would be very useful to be able to visualize such a symbol. Such a symbol is a very useful one for bringing your mind to bear upon. In fact, if you could bring your mind to bear on the symbol to such an extent as to bring it to a point, you could, with the assistance of another mechanism, take yourself into superconscious experience. We have to learn to visualize symbols of importance. I can draw a 5-pointed star of hierarchy in a quarter of a second. Why? Because that symbol is within me. It's within me, embedded within me. No wonder I can draw it. How will we learn to construct such symbols? Bring the mind in the inner way to, as it were, anchor on such symbols. First of all, you have to learn to clear the mind, and the way to do it is to control it, to be able to take it inwards and then bring it up to this region. One of the ways in which you can steady the mind there, as you steadied it in the region of Muladhara, is to turn the eyes inwards and upwards. The effect of turning the eyes inwards and upwards is to anchor the consciousness in that region. And you will find that you're not interested in things going on outside or elsewhere, because your mind is focused on the act of turning the eyes inwards and upwards. But please, don't do this exercise without previously, for a week at least, doing eye exercises each day. I have given these exercises specifically in my book.